Your blood pressure medication is actively working inside your body at this very moment, carrying out exactly the function it was prescribed to perform. And somewhere nearby, in your kitchen, sitting on your counter, tucked inside your refrigerator, or resting on a shelf in your supplement cabinet, there are things quietly working against it. Not because you did something wrong, not because you weren't careful, but because nobody ever sat you down and walked you through the reality that everything surrounding your medication determines how powerfully that medication actually performs. The foods on your plate, the drinks you pour, the supplements you take specifically to improve your health, the time of day you swallow the tablet, even the moment you push yourself upright out of bed in the morning. Every single one of those decisions is either reinforcing your medication or actively opposing it. And the majority of people currently taking amlodipine, Losartan, or Lisinopril have never once been told which side of that equation they are living on. There is one particular item I need to bring to your attention before anything else. A drink, specifically. One that the majority of adults over the age of 60 consume completely freely and intentionally so, because they believe it to be one of the most natural, heart-supportive hydration options available to them. It is positioned and marketed exactly that way. It sits in the health food aisle of the grocery store, and it has been silently disrupting the potassium balance of patients on Losartan and Lisinopril who did absolutely everything else correctly. I will tell you exactly what it is in just a moment. But first, the 10 things I am walking you through today are the 10 conversations that should have taken place the day that prescription was first placed in your hands. Some of what I share will align with what you already suspected. Several things will catch you genuinely off guard. And one of them explains why the single most dangerous moment of the entire day for someone on blood pressure medication is not the morning you accidentally skip a dose. It is the morning you stand up. My name is Dr. Narita. Before we go any further, I need to be direct with you. Do not stop, adjust, reduce, or skip any medication based on what you hear in this video. Everything covered here is information designed to fuel your next conversation with your doctor and your next visit to the pharmacy. I want to share with you the story of a patient I will refer to as Lawrence. He was 74 years old, a retired pharmacist, a man who understood his medications at a level most patients never come close to reaching. He had been avoiding grapefruit for years without fail. He carefully monitored his sodium intake. He had his potassium levels tested on a regular schedule. And still, his blood pressure readings were slowly drifting in the wrong direction, and his potassium was creeping upward. The source turned out to be something that not a single member of his care team had ever thought to connect to his medication regimen. We will return to Lawrence. But right now, let's begin. Number 1, the potassium conflict. High potassium foods and ACE inhibitors and ARBs. Lisinopril and Losartan both operate by blocking the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, which in turn suppresses aldosterone, the hormone that ordinarily instructs the kidneys to release potassium from the body. When aldosterone is suppressed, the kidneys hold onto more potassium than they otherwise would. In most patients, this effect is mild, monitored through routine blood work, and manageable in isolation. The problem arises when dietary potassium is simultaneously elevated, because the two retention forces begin stacking on top of each other. Bananas, oranges, tomatoes, potatoes, avocados, beans, large servings of leafy greens. These are the foods that patients on Losartan or Lisinopril are most frequently counseled to moderate. Most people who have received that guidance have made those adjustments. What Lawrence had never adjusted was what he was drinking. Coconut water contains approximately 600 milligrams of potassium in a single 12-ounce serving, the equivalent of 1.5 bananas. And it is sold and marketed explicitly as a natural, wholesome hydration choice. It never appeared on any potassium warning list he had been given because it is a beverage, not a food. 12 ounces of coconut water every single day for months had been quietly pushing his potassium upward while he diligently monitored everything on the standard list he had received. What should you do? When you sit down with your doctor to review potassium, bring your beverage labels to that appointment alongside your food diary. Sports drinks, electrolyte-enhanced waters, potassium-fortified juices, and coconut water all carry potassium loads that the vast majority of patients never account for. Check the label of every drink you consume on a regular basis, starting today. Number 2, salt substitutes. The heart-healthy swap that creates a hidden potassium problem. Salt substitutes marketed as low-sodium, heart-conscious alternatives work by replacing sodium chloride with potassium chloride. The instinct behind reaching for them is entirely sound. Reducing sodium is the correct direction for blood pressure management. But for anyone on Lisinopril or Losartan whose kidneys are already holding on to more potassium than usual, the execution introduces a silent and substantial additional potassium burden. A single quarter teaspoon of a typical salt substitute delivers between 600 and 800 milligrams of potassium before any other potassium-containing food has been consumed. 3 meals in a day, seasoned with a salt substitute, layered on top of naturally potassium-rich foods, layered on top of a medication that is already slowing potassium excretion. Those 3 forces combine into a daily potassium exposure that standard dietary counseling never anticipated or addressed. Think of potassium balance in a patient on an ARB or ACE inhibitor as a sink with a partially restricted drain. At normal flow rates, the water stays manageable. A salt substitute is like opening 2 or 3 additional faucets at the same time. What should you do? Look at the ingredient list on your salt substitute and check for potassium chloride. Bring the product itself to your next appointment and ask directly whether your current potassium level can safely support regular use at the amounts you typically use. In the meantime, season your food with fresh herbs, spices, lemon juice, and vinegar. All of them deliver real flavor without the potassium burden. Number 3, grapefruit and amlodipine. The interaction that reaches further than most people realize. Amlodipine is processed and cleared from the body through a liver enzyme called CYP3A4. Grapefruit contains natural compounds called furanocoumarins, and these compounds irreversibly disable this enzyme for up to 72 hours following a single exposure. When CYP3A4 is blocked, amlodipine accumulates in the bloodstream at levels 30 to 90% above the prescribed dose, creating more pronounced vasodilation, more ankle swelling, more dizziness when changing positions, and a significantly elevated fall risk, none of which was intended by the dose your doctor wrote. The majority of people on amlodipine are already aware of the grapefruit warning. What most people are not aware of is that grapefruit is not the only fruit that carries furanocoumarins at clinically meaningful concentrations. Pomelo, the oversized citrus fruit now increasingly available in American grocery stores, sometimes marketed as a milder, friendlier version of grapefruit, carries the same compounds at comparable concentrations. Seville oranges, used in the production of traditional marmalades and citrus-flavored liqueurs, including Cointreau and Grand Marnier, produce the identical enzyme inhibition. A patient who has been conscientiously avoiding grapefruit juice for years, but who eats pomelo regularly, spreads Seville orange marmalade on their toast each morning, or enjoys an occasional orange liqueur. That patient has been triggering the identical CYP3A4 blockade through a completely different vehicle without ever knowing that the warning extended to them. What should you do? Expand your avoidance to include pomelo and any product whose ingredient list includes Seville, orange, or bitter orange. Turn over your marmalade jar and read the label. Traditional marmalade almost universally uses Seville oranges. Sweet navel oranges, lemons, limes, and clementines are entirely safe to enjoy without any concern. Number 4, alcohol and blood pressure medications. 2 vasodilators operating in the same body at the same time. Alcohol independently relaxes the smooth muscle, lining the walls of peripheral blood vessels, producing vasodilation through mechanisms that overlap directly with amlodipine's calcium channel blockade and with Losartan's angiotensin receptor blockade. When alcohol and blood pressure medication are simultaneously active in the body, their individual pressure-lowering effects combine. Here is what makes this particularly relevant. Amlodipine has a half-life of 30 to 50 hours. The dose taken this morning is still operating at its full therapeutic level when the glass of wine arrives with dinner. The alcohol does not meet a resting, unmedicated system. It meets a circulatory system that is already pharmacologically vasodilated, and the combined effect meaningfully elevates the risk of dizziness and falls with any change in body position following drinking. In adults over 60, whose baroreceptor reflexes are already naturally slower to respond, this interaction calls for specific, informed awareness. Not mandatory abstinence, but genuine awareness. What should you do? On any evening when you choose to drink, sit quietly for several minutes before standing up. Slow every position change down intentionally. And be especially careful about combining alcohol with hot or thermally warm environments. A hot tub, a heated restaurant, a sauna. Because heat produces its own independent vasodilation, and adding that thermal effect creates a third mechanism stacking on the 2 already present. Number 5, processed foods marketed as heart-healthy choices with hidden sodium inside. The sodium that works against your blood pressure medication is almost never coming from the salt shaker you control at the dinner table. It is engineered into packaged products at the factory, long before they ever reach your kitchen. Bread that does not register as salty to your palate, yet carries substantial sodium in every slice. Breakfast cereals specifically marketed for cardiovascular health that conceal sodium content behind sweetness. Canned soups labeled low-fat that can deliver more than half of an entire day's sodium allowance in a single bowl. Deli turkey labeled as lean protein that relies on sodium as a primary preservative. Here's the specific mechanism this creates for patients on amlodipine. Dietary sodium drives fluid retention, directly expanding blood volume, and that expanded volume directly counteracts the pressure reduction amlodipine is working to produce. On high sodium days, the medication is working harder against greater resistance and producing less net improvement in the reading. This is the specific reason why a patient on a stable amlodipine dose can have meaningfully different readings between Monday and Wednesday with no change whatsoever in their dose. What changed was the sodium load the medication was working against. What should you do? Pull out the 5 processed foods you eat most frequently and read the sodium content per realistic serving. Not per the serving size printed on the label, but per the amount you actually consume. The American Heart Association recommends staying under 1,500 milligrams daily for adults managing hypertension. 3 commonly eaten processed foods can together exceed that number before a single dinner ingredient is opened. 5 topics covered. 2 potassium sources that most patients never connect to their medication. The grapefruit warning that quietly extends to fruits no one suspects. Alcohol stacking its vasodilating effect on top of a medication that is still fully active from this morning. And the hidden sodium embedded inside products specifically marketed as the healthier choice. The next 3 topics involve something sitting in your supplement cabinet right now, something in your coffee cup each morning, and a question about when you actually take the tablet. A question whose answer, according to published research, may account for 45% of your cardiovascular risk outcome on the very same medication at the very same dose. Stay with me. If this video is giving you something concrete to act on, tap subscribe right now. Most people who watch this video will not remember this. Channel exists by tomorrow morning. If this conversation mattered to you, 1 second is genuinely all it takes. Number 6, caffeine and the morning medication timing conflict. Caffeine activates the sympathetic nervous system, elevating heart rate and producing an acute spike in blood pressure that peaks roughly 30 to 60 minutes after consumption. Blood pressure medication is simultaneously working in the opposite direction. When both arrive at nearly the same moment, these 2 forces are running in direct opposition during caffeine's peak stimulatory window. For patients on amlodipine or an ARB, the medication ultimately prevails over time. But the acute caffeine peak creates reading variability that the majority of patients misread as blood pressure instability rather than a straightforward timing overlap. For patients on beta blockers, metoprolol, atenolol, the conflict carries more direct clinical weight. Caffeine activates alpha-adrenergic receptors that beta blockers do not address, and in patients with any history of arrhythmia, this window can be enough to trigger palpitations. What should you do? Take your blood pressure medication first thing, then allow 30 to 45 minutes to pass before your first cup of coffee. That gap separates the medication's absorption window from caffeine's stimulatory peak, producing more consistent and reliable morning readings without requiring any modification to your coffee routine whatsoever. Number 7, supplements that are quietly canceling your medication. 3 supplements, each taken for entirely legitimate, well-intentioned health reasons. Interact with blood pressure medications through distinct mechanisms that most prescribing conversations never cover. John's wort, widely used to support mood and improve sleep, contains a compound called hyperforin, which is a potent CYP3A4 inducer, and it operates in the precise opposite direction from grapefruit, where grapefruit blocks the metabolic exit and allows amlodipine to accumulate. John's wort throws that exit door wide open, accelerating the clearance of amlodipine faster than the prescribed dose was designed to accommodate. Published research documents reductions in calcium channel blocker, plasma concentrations of 30 to 50% in patients taking these 2 simultaneously. In practical terms, that is the pharmacological equivalent of the prescribed dose being cut nearly in half. A patient whose blood pressure readings have been climbing steadily on a previously stable amlodipine dose, and who added a natural mood supplement several months earlier, may be experiencing medication under delivery, not a genuine worsening of their underlying condition. High-dose curcumin supplements, those formulated at 500 to 1,000 milligrams per capsule, inhibit CX enzymes through the same prostaglandin pathway as ibuprofen, blunting the antihypertensive effectiveness of both Losartan and Lisinopril. Turmeric used as a cooking spice does not come close to reaching the threshold where this becomes clinically relevant. A concentrated curcumin supplement absolutely does. Black licorice root, commonly found in herbal teas and digestive health supplements, contains a compound called glycyrrhizin, which mimics the action of aldosterone, causing the body to retain sodium, excrete potassium, and directly counteract the very mechanisms that both ARBs and ACE inhibitors depend on. The FDA has specifically issued warnings that as little as 2 weeks of daily consumption of real licorice can produce dangerously low potassium levels in adults over 40 with hypertension. What should you do? Bring every supplement you currently take, by full product name and precise dose, to your next pharmacy appointment and ask explicitly about CYP3A4 interactions and prostaglandin pathway interference. Supplements are medications. They deserve to be evaluated and reviewed with exactly the same rigor as medications. Number 8. Medication timing and the peak protection window. Blood pressure rises sharply between 6 and 10 in the morning as cortisol levels climb and the sympathetic nervous system activates in the period leading up to and immediately following waking. This morning, surge represents the window during which heart attacks and strokes are statistically most likely to occur. A medication taken at 7 in the morning reaches its peak by mid-morning and then gradually declines throughout the rest of the day, leaving it at a potentially reduced level precisely when the following morning's surge arrives again. A medication taken at bedtime, by contrast, is still near its peak plasma concentration during the 6 to 10 a.m. surge window, providing coverage from the inside during the most vulnerable hours, rather than scrambling to catch up to the surge from the outside. The Hygia chronotherapy trial, published in the European Heart Journal and tracking more than 19,000 adults across 6 years, found that bedtime dosing reduced the occurrence of major cardiovascular events, heart attack, stroke, and cardiovascular death, by 45% compared to morning dosing of the identical medication at the identical dose. Same prescription, same dose. Different clock position, 45% difference in outcome. This body of evidence is still evolving, and bedtime dosing is not clinically appropriate for every medication class or every individual patient. What should you do? At your next medical appointment, ask this specific question. Given my particular medication class and my blood pressure pattern, should I be taking my medication at bedtime rather than in the morning? Bring the Hygia chronotherapy trial into that conversation by name. That specific, directed question will generate a personalized clinical response, rather than the default assumption that morning dosing is appropriate simply because morning dosing has always been the convention. Number 9, dehydration, orthostatic hypotension, and the single most dangerous moment of your entire day. The most dangerous moment of the day for a person on blood pressure medication is not the morning you forget to take a dose. It is the moment you stand up from bed in the morning. During sleep, blood pressure reaches the lowest point of the full 24-hour cycle.